When I think about the complexity of the human mind, I cannot separate it from the bonds that shape it. Mary Ainsworth, whose work on attachment transformed our understanding of psychology, taught us that the mind is not simply an isolated organ of thought. It is, in many ways, a living archive of every connection, every embrace, and every absence we have ever experienced. Ainsworth's famous strange situation experiment was more than a test of children's reactions to separation. It was a mirror into the architecture of the human soul. What she revealed was simple yet profound. The patterns of attachment formed in infancy echo into adulthood, guiding our emotions, relationships, and even our sense of self. The human mind, then, is not built in isolation. It is constructed through trust, or the absence of it. When a child feels securely attached, when their caregiver consistently responds to their needs, the mind grows with a foundation of safety. Safety becomes the soil in which curiosity, exploration, and resilience are born. But when this foundation is shaky, when care is inconsistent, absent, or intrusive, the mind adapts in ways that protect but also restrict. Anxiety, avoidance, and fear become companions that linger far beyond childhood. From Ainsworth's perspective, the mind is not only rational or emotional, it is relational. Every thought, every desire, every fear carries the imprint of our earliest experiences of attachment. To understand ourselves, we must revisit those early bonds, not as passive memories, but as living frameworks that still operate within us. When I reflect on this, I see how often adults confuse their current struggles with isolated problems, a fear of intimacy, difficulty trusting, and unexplainable restlessness. But through Ainsworth's lens, these are not isolated, they are patterns. They are the residue of the first bonds we knew, bonds that taught us what it meant to be safe, valued, or perhaps abandoned. This is why the study of attachment is not merely academic. It is personal. It is a journey into the heart of who we are. It explains why some of us cling too tightly to relationships, afraid of loss at every moment, while others distance themselves, convinced that closeness only leads to disappointment. And for some, the confusion is even greater, wanting closeness yet fearing it at the same time. The human mind, according to Mary Ainsworth, is not a blank slate. It is a tapestry woven with the threads of attachment. Some threads are strong, others frayed, and some tangled. But to see the mind this way is to recognize not only the weight of the past, but also the possibility of repair. For what is woven can also be rewoven. If part 1 was about seeing the mind as a tapestry of attachment, part 2 invites us to focus on one particular thread: anxiety. Mary Ainsworth showed us that anxiety is not merely a symptom of modern life, nor simply the result of stressful situations. At its core, anxiety often begins as a response to the uncertainty of love, care, and security. In her research, Ainsworth observed children whose caregivers were inconsistent, sometimes present, sometimes absent, sometimes nurturing, sometimes withdrawn. These children developed what we now call anxious attachment. Their young minds lived in a constant state of vigilance. Will my needs be met this time? Or will I be left alone again? This early uncertainty shapes how the mind learns to anticipate the world. The anxious child becomes the anxious adult, who seeks closeness but never feels entirely secure in it. Relationships feel fragile, and even small moments of distance can trigger storms of worry. The human mind, then, carries an imprint of abandonment, not necessarily because abandonment was absolute, but because it was unpredictable. From Ainsworth's point of view, anxiety is not irrational. It is a learned survival strategy. It is the mind's way of staying prepared for inconsistency. Yet this vigilance comes at a cost. Instead of resting in trust, the anxious mind burns its energy in anticipation. Instead of enjoying connection, it fears losing it. What strikes me most is how universal this experience can be. Even those who had relatively secure beginnings may feel anxious attachments later in life, especially if trust is broken. The mind, after all, is always reshaping itself in response to relationships. Ainsworth's insights remind us that anxiety is less about weakness and more about adaptation. The anxious adult is not broken, but is living with a pattern once designed to protect them. When I think about this, I realize how compassion becomes essential. To understand anxiety as Ainsworth did is to move away from judgment, rather than asking, "Why can't I just relax? Why am I so needy?" The deeper question becomes, what did my earliest attachments teach me about safety? And how is that lesson still living in me today? This reflection transforms anxiety from a personal flaw into a relational story. It reminds us that behind every restless thought is a longing for security. Behind every fear of abandonment is a history of inconsistent love. And in this recognition lies the beginning of healing. For Ainsworth, the key is not to erase anxiety, but to understand it. By tracing its roots, we can learn that what once was a survival tool does not have to be the script for our future. The human mind is shaped by attachment, yes, but it is also capable of reshaping. And perhaps the first step in rewriting the anxious script is to acknowledge its origins with honesty and compassion. If anxiety is the cry of the mind desperate for closeness, avoidance is the silence of the mind determined to protect itself from disappointment. Mary Ainsworth's research revealed this second pattern, avoidant attachment, in children whose caregivers were emotionally unavailable, dismissive, or even rejecting. The avoidant child learns an unspoken lesson early. Expressing my needs will not bring comfort. It may even push others away. So, I must rely on myself. In the moment, this adaptation is brilliant. It allows the child to minimize rejection and survive in an environment where emotional needs are not consistently met. But as this child grows into adulthood, the protective strategy turns into a mask. The avoidant adult appears independent, strong, even detached. They rarely admit to needing anyone. On the surface, this seems like resilience, but beneath the mask lies a quieter reality. Fear. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of being let down again. Fear of relying on others only to feel abandoned once more. Through Ainsworth's lens, avoidance is not coldness, it is self-preservation. The human mind, in its incredible adaptability, shuts the doors of intimacy not out of cruelty, but out of survival. Yet this survival comes with a paradox. While the avoidant individual distances themselves to avoid pain, they also deprive themselves of the warmth and depth of true connection. What fascinates me is how subtle this pattern can be. An avoidant person may seem perfectly at ease, even thriving alone. They may pride themselves on not needing closeness. But if we look deeper, as Ainsworth encourages us to, we see small cracks. The unease in moments of intimacy, the difficulty in asking for help, the tendency to withdraw just when connection becomes possible. Avoidance, like anxiety, is a story written in childhood but carried into the adult mind. It whispers, "Do not trust too much. Do not hope too much. You will be safer if you remain behind the walls." And so, many live their lives half-hidden, convinced that detachment is strength when, in truth, it is fear wearing armor. To see avoidance through Ainsworth's eyes is to recognize its humanity. The avoidant person is not heartless. They are wounded. Their detachment is not a rejection of love, but a defense against its potential absence. Understanding this changes the way we see ourselves and others. Instead of blaming avoidance, we begin to ask, what pain did this person endure that made closeness feel so dangerous? The human mind, shaped by attachment, does not forget. But Ainsworth reminds us that awareness is the beginning of transformation. When we uncover the origins of avoidance, we can begin to gently lower the walls. The mask need not be permanent. Behind it, there is always a longing, the same longing present in every human being, to love and be loved, to know and be known. Among the attachment patterns Mary Ainsworth observed, one stood out as the most complex and painful, disorganized attachment. If anxious attachment is the cry for closeness and avoidant attachment is the silence of self-protection, disorganized attachment is the paradox of both happening at once. It is the human mind caught in a cycle of longing and fear, unable to resolve the tension between them. This pattern often develops when the caregiver, the very person who should provide safety, is also a source of fear. The child finds themselves in an impossible situation. They want comfort, but the comforter is unpredictable, frightening, or even harmful. Their young mind cannot choose between approaching and avoiding, so it does both. They move toward and away, cling and withdraw, desperate and afraid. As adults, those with disorganized attachment often feel torn within themselves. They crave intimacy, yet the moment it draws near, they feel panic. They yearn for trust, but trusting feels dangerous. Their relationships are often turbulent, swinging between closeness and distance, affection and conflict. What Ainsworth showed us is that this instability is not random. It is the residue of early contradictions written deep into the psyche. To me, the disorganized mind is a testament to both the vulnerability and the resilience of the human spirit. Vulnerability, because the wounds of childhood can echo so powerfully into adulthood, shaping how we love and how we fear. Resilience, because despite the turmoil, the longing for connection persists. The heart continues to reach, even when experience has taught it to retreat. Psychologically, this pattern reveals how deeply attachment is woven into the human mind. Disorganized attachment is not simply a matter of poor choices or being difficult. It is the legacy of a nervous system trained to anticipate both danger and comfort from the same source. The mind learns that love and fear walk hand in hand, and it carries this lesson forward until it is consciously addressed. When I reflect on Ainsworth's insights, I realize how much compassion is needed here. Those with disorganized attachment are often judged harshly for being too much, too confusing, or too unstable. But in truth, they are living with an inner conflict no child should have faced, the need for safety entangled with the fear of it. To heal, the disorganized mind must find what it never had: consistent safety, a relationship where trust is slowly built and never broken. This is no easy task, but Ainsworth's work reminds us that it is possible. The patterns of attachment may be deep, but they are not unchangeable. The human mind, even when fractured by contradiction, remains capable of growth. To see the disorganized pattern is not to condemn a person to chaos forever, but to illuminate the path toward healing. For within every tangled attachment is still the same longing that unites us all, the longing to love and to be loved without fear. As I come to the final part of this reflection on Mary Ainsworth's work, I am reminded that her research was never meant to simply categorize people into anxious, avoidant, or disorganized. Labels, after all, can only take us so far. What mattered most to Ainsworth was the recognition that attachment shapes the human mind, but also that the mind is capable of reshaping itself. Healing begins with awareness. When we see our patterns not as random flaws, but as adaptations to early environments, we begin to remove the weight of judgment. The anxious mind is not weak. It is vigilant because it once had to be. The avoidant mind is not cold. It is guarded because it once faced rejection. The disorganized mind is not chaotic. It is conflicted because love and fear once came from the same place. From Ainsworth's perspective, true change happens in the context of relationships. Just as early bonds shaped our attachment, new bonds can reshape them. A consistent, trustworthy partner, a compassionate friend, or even a skilled therapist can provide the stability needed to rewrite the old script. Each moment of safety experienced in the present sends a message backward through time. You are no longer alone. You can trust again. But healing is not only relational, it is also personal. It requires us to meet ourselves with compassion, to see the frightened child still living within us, and to care for them as no one did before. This is the heart of self-awareness, to look inward and not turn away, to listen to our fears without shame, and to nurture the parts of ourselves that once felt invisible. Ainsworth's teachings remind me that attachment is not destiny. The patterns we carry are powerful, yes, but they are not final. The mind, though scarred by early experiences, remains remarkably plastic, capable of learning, unlearning, and growing. In this sense, every anxious thought, every avoidant retreat, Every disorganized conflict becomes not just a symptom, but an invitation to understand, to heal, and to change. To live with awareness of our attachment patterns is to take back authorship of our lives. It is to acknowledge that while our beginnings may have shaped us, they do not have to define us. The anxious can learn to rest and trust. The avoidant can learn that vulnerability is not weakness. The disorganized can discover that love does not always have to be tangled with fear. In the end, Mary Ainsworth's greatest contribution was not simply the classification of attachment styles, but the revelation that the human mind is profoundly relational and therefore profoundly capable of transformation. To heal our attachment is to heal our connection to ourselves, to others, and to life itself. And so, the story of attachment is not just about where we come from, it is about where we can go. For in every one of us lives the possibility of rewriting the patterns, weaving a new tapestry of safety, trust, and love.